Amid all the JT Miller trade rumors, we have seen the Canucks also shopping Elias Pettersson. And a trade has gotten close, not just between the Carolina Hurricanes, but also the Buffalo Sabres, and more teams are entering the Pettersson sweepstakes. Now, if we are to actually see a Pettersson trade, what does his value look like, and which teams are most likely to go after him? Well, make sure you watch till the end, because we're going to be breaking down all those topics here today. And hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this, presented by BetUS. Now, before we get into the Pettersson rumors, we'll take a quick second here to talk about today's sponsor in BetUS. The place make your hockey picks throughout the year. You can go through every single game and every single team. If it's your favorite team playing, you can go through the odds for them and potentially make picks on them, or if your team sucks, against them. You can also go through the different teams who make the playoffs, yes or no on there, as well as Stanley Cup odds and a lot more options on basically every single hockey league. I mean, they got odds right now on the Denmark Hockey League today, so a lot of options over there. Just use code YouTube150 when you sign up, and you'll get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% sign-up bonus on your next deposit after that. And let's get right back into the video. Now, we've talked about Elias Pettersson a lot on this channel, and pretty recently over the last couple weeks, about the JT Miller rumors and Pettersson being linked to them as well, and how I thought that trading Pettersson would be a mistake for the Canucks. But it seems like since then we've seen more and more momentum towards a Pettersson trade rather than a Miller trade. And I think a lot of this is just because of the ease of dealing both of these players, as well as the value that could come back. It seems like from what we've heard, if a JT Miller trade were to happen, it would be pretty underwhelming for Vancouver, considering the trade protection, the cap hit, and just the lack of real value across the league. If a Miller trade were to happen, it just doesn't seem like it would have the assets coming back that Vancouver would really want. But you look at Elias Pettersson, who, especially in this first year of this big contract, has no trade protection. And even though he's had a down year this season, just 31 points in 43 games, the value across the league seems to be substantially higher. And especially since the Mikko Rantanen trade, we've heard a lot about how Carolina almost struck a deal with Vancouver to have Pettersson go to the Canes and Natchez and Moore going back to Vancouver. So it seems like there has been some heavy activity on the Pettersson front that we just have not known about. And it makes sense. Pettersson, when healthy, when consistent, is a top 10 center in this league, in my opinion. He was that a couple of seasons ago. 102 points, almost 40 goals in 80 games. He was somebody that was really developing into this premier centerman. Since then, I think we've seen him a little bit less consistent, a little bit less impactful in the offensive direction, though I think his two-way game has still been growing and getting better, and I think that's where Pettersson has really grown the most the past few seasons. No, I would attribute this to a few things. I think especially in the goal-scoring department, his confidence has been completely shot, just on pace for 19 goals this season. But I think one of the bigger reasons why we've seen Pettersson decline in ways is because of the line mate matchups and what we've seen since that 2023 season, because we saw Andrei Kuzmenko burst onto the scene as this rookie that was unstoppable, as a great line mate for Pettersson. He was somebody that back in 2023 had an unbelievable season, almost 40 goals, 74 points. Those two together were magical. But I think you started to see in the next season Kuzmenko decline in his impact, get a little bit more predictable as a player, and thus Pettersson's line mate that was dynamic was really nowhere to be seen. And I think that really took a toll on Pettersson, because outside of that, I don't think there were any line mates and any guys that were able to match Pettersson's ability like Kuzmenko did. You could make the case that for a franchise player, he should be able to work with any winger out there, but I would argue for Vancouver, Kuzmenko was such a perfect fit, and since that decline, we've seen Pettersson also decline in the same ways. But on a new team, with a change of scenery, with a team that's confident with him and actually has a great, faster winger to work with, I could see Pettersson easily getting back to the 100-point plateau and getting back to that elite status as an NHL center. So which teams could be after him? Well, the good news is that we've already heard so much about the plethora of teams that are not just interested, but in on the Pettersson sweepstakes, and there are some surprising ones here. Now, the first team that we knew about was the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, who almost struck a deal before going after Mikko Rantanen. I think because Rantanen's on the team now, I don't quite see a trade happening, though with the Canes, I could still see them going after a second-line center to have behind Sebastian Aho. But Elias Pettersson, I think, would just be too hard to get. Even though the Canes, I think, have a pretty decent prospect pool, they have some good options there. I'm not sure how willing they're going to want to be to get rid of those type of guys. We'll see what ends up happening. Carolina has already gone for it, so we'll see if they do it again. I think teams that haven't already gone for a blockbuster are more likely. The second team we've heard a lot about that has gotten closer to a Pettersson trade is the Buffalo Sabres. According to Chad Dominiskis, he's somebody that's talking about the Buffalo connection with Pettersson. He says that there's building momentum between the Sabres and Canucks involving EP, and this makes sense considering the Sabres' needs, considering what they want to be going forward. I think Pettersson can fix a lot of the issues, especially on the defensive side of that forward group. And we've also heard a lot about what that potential package could look like. According to David Pagnotta, he says the Canucks want Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram to package for Pettersson, but also like Owen Power. And this is the thing to me that I think is interesting, because if the Canucks really just wanted Cousins and Byram, I think we would have seen a trade already. I think that is an easy deal for the Sabres to make. But I think there's more than meets the eye to that, as they mention that they also like Owen Power. I have a feeling that the Canucks will really want Owen Power in the end if they're going to make a deal happen. Now, Dylan Cousins being a part of a Pettersson trade makes complete sense. This is something we talked about really all year as a struggling player that could be looking to move on. You look at kind of the similar position as Pettersson, where since a breakout year in 2023, we've seen him decline and decline. This year on pace for just a measly 40 points, and that's better than where he started this year, trust me. And just the overall game has not been there, the consistency and just the work ethic. It seems like his fit in Buffalo is just not there anymore. In Vancouver, I think there is the potential to still be a second line center behind JT Miller there. I think in a new change of scenery, he could absolutely work out there. I don't know how much he's going to get back to those 2023 type of levels, but I could see similar type of, maybe a 60-point-ish type of guy. And as a second line center, that could be a pretty good replacement for the Canucks, not on Pettersson's level, but still, when we're talking about younger centers, about as good as you can get on the market here. Now, you got your potential top 6 center involved in the deal, but of course, we also have the potential of a defenseman being added onto it, with Power and Bowen Byram reportedly being the two guys Vancouver likes the most. Owen Power, of course, makes sense why Vancouver would like him the most. The big size, the skating ability, even though I don't think he uses that physicality as much as he should, there's big potential there. There always has been with him. I think Byram is much more of a finished product at this point, but he's still developing at 23 years old, and this year, 23 points in 49 games. Though with Power, he's somebody that's around the same level, on pace for 42 points and 10 goals this year. I think in Power's case, there's more offensive potential, and I would say even more defensive potential, which would lead me to believe would be the reason why Vancouver would be so hell-bent on trying to trade for him. If I'm trading a player like Pettersson, a player like Owen Power, I think, would need to come back, more so than Dylan Cousins. Sure, you want to get a defenseman there, but Power, in terms of potential, I think is the best player you can get in a Pettersson deal. I think the thing that's happening here is that Buffalo wants to give away Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram, but the Canucks want both Cousins and Owen Power, and the Sabres aren't comfortable with doing that, which I can understand the reasons for in the cases of both these guys having massive potentials. But I think if you're going to be trading for a player like Pettersson, who's locked up long-term like he is, it'll cost a pretty penny, and that's, I think, a big reason why we haven't seen Pettersson traded yet. But in terms of teams out there that have a plethora of young players who already have NHL experience and have proven themselves in ways, Buffalo might be the team that has the most guys up that alley, and I could easily see a Pettersson deal happening. Honestly, out of everybody, I think the Sabres are the front runner here. Now, right up that alley of Dylan Cousins, talking about second-line centers that Vancouver could potentially trade for, I think for the Canucks, they'd be a little bit less interested in a player like Norris, considering at his age, he hasn't quite developed into the player he needed to be, especially for that contract. And the health in history is also a complete night and day difference. In Norris's case, that ability to stay healthy just hasn't quite been there. This year it has, though, and if Vancouver is trustworthy about that going forward, maybe that could change things. And this year he's been okay, 28 goals on pace for and 45 points. That's not too bad. In the goal scoring department, Vancouver could absolutely use him, especially in that power play. Him and Miller could be really interesting together. Now, the one thing that makes me a little bit more hesitant on the Sens being a true fit is just the defensive options, because I think for Vancouver, they're not just going to want to get a second-line center in a Pettersson deal, they're also going to want to get a bona fide top 4D. In terms of the youth and the options there, Tyler Clevin maybe fits the best on the younger side of things, 6'4", left shot D, and somebody that I think defensively is going to be a decent defenseman. On the older side of things, Artem Zub could maybe be a fit, but with how he's played, especially over the last year and a half, I'm not sure how much of a fix that's going to be for Vancouver's defense. So I feel like for Ottawa, there's nobody on that defensive side that really is a true fit. Maybe if the Canucks are higher on Zub than we're guessing, then maybe that could be something. But I think all things considered with the options the Senators have, especially with the fact there's no chance they're going to be trading a Chabot or Sanderson, I think the options are a little bit limited, at least compared to what Buffalo could offer. I just compare what the two offers could be. You look at Buffalo, you look at Byram, and he's healthier, he's younger, and cheaper than Norris. And you look at the defensive options, and I think for Vancouver, they're really going to want to prioritize a puck mover, where for Ottawa, they don't have that. And they're not going to move Chabot and Sanderson to do a Pettersson trade. That's just not going to happen. So I think for the Canucks, and you compare the options here, I think Buffalo has the pieces that Vancouver wants, a little bit more, though Ottawa could be still pretty competitive here. And then we got another update from the fourth period, this being even more recent, linking the teams that have inquired about Elias Pettersson, and you have a bunch of different names. First, you got the Senators and the Sabres, two teams we already talked about, but then you got the Minnesota Wild, the Dallas Stars, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Detroit Red Wings. Three new teams mentioned there that we haven't talked about before, and to me, Detroit is the most enticing. You look at that four group and what they could really use. I love Larkin, but him as a second line center behind Pettersson would be deadly, and Pettersson with Raymond, I think, would be the perfect combination for both of those players there. And I think it would really add more of a star element to that Detroit four group that I still think they need a little bit more of. I think the big problem with Detroit, though, is even though Pettersson is a perfect fit for the Red Wings, I'm not sure how many players on the Wings are a perfect fit for the Canucks. In terms of the center situation, obviously you're not trading for Dylan Larkin, but a JT Compher would probably be the next best option, but he's somebody that struggled this year and hasn't really had the greatest season, at least compared to his last couple of years with both Detroit and Colorado. If he gets back to that 2023 type of level, then maybe he could be a second line center for the Canucks, but it definitely would be a downgrade from what Pettersson is capable of. But you'll also look at the defense, and there's options for the Canucks that I think they would absolutely love. But how willing are the Red Wings to give up a Simone Edvinsson or an Axel Sandin-Pellikka? I think both of those guys are practically untouchable by this Detroit team. Maybe Marco Kasper is the best option to go back, but he's somebody that is mostly playing wing this year, and I think it would be a tall order to ask him to be a second-line center already in his career. It would take some time. Maybe in a couple of years' time he could be that, but I think for the Canucks, they want more instant gratification. They want somebody that can easily slot into that spot, and even though JT Compher is fine, I don't know if he's going to be the perfect fit that they want. But we will put a pin in this because I think Detroit is a fascinating fit and one that I think we should be keeping an eye on. Now, of course, my favorite team of the Dallas Stars are mentioned here. I would be shocked if we actually did trade for Elias Pettersson. It would be insane, but it would probably have to cost a Rupe Hintz or a Wyatt Johnston, and I just don't know if the Stars are really all that appetizing and trying to trade that four group and trying to make any major changes because I don't think they really need to. I would like to add a top six winger if possible. I think the center situation is fine. You look at Johnston, Duchesne, Hintz, those are all three quality centermen, especially this season, and I just don't really know if you need to really tinker with that. To me, it's potentially adding a top six wing, it's going after the defense. Those are what I would be targeting, and you'd have to take out of that defense to trade for Pettersson, especially in the case of a Thomas Harley, who I think would be basically a solidified piece of a Pettersson trade. I don't know if I want to trade him. He is such an integral part of that defense that I just don't want to change that. But the last team mentioned was the Minnesota Wild, and this one I think is up that alley of Buffalo, of Ottawa, of teams that I could see having the assets to make a deal happen. Now, first things first, I think Vancouver would absolutely adore Joel Eriksson Ek. He's somebody that I think the Canucks would absolutely be targeting, but I would say for Minnesota, they're probably the highest team on him in the entire league, as they should be. He has been a fantastic defensive centerman for a long time now, and even though this year has been a little bit of a point decrease, he's had 60-plus point seasons back-to-back before this year, and is somebody that has really put himself in that Selke conversation for a while now. I think he's somebody that Minnesota wants to keep no matter what. Marco Rossi, though, makes a lot more sense because we've heard so much about Minnesota wanting to trade him for some reason, even though time and time again, he's been proving everybody wrong. You look at what he's been able to do this season, 44 points, 17 goals in 50 games, on pace for 72 points this season. He has been absolutely marvelous, especially in power play situations, really rising the offensive game. To me, though, this is who is most likely to go to Vancouver, especially as a second-line center fit. He's somebody that is versatile, can bring some good work ethic out there, and I just think has such a well-balanced game already that Vancouver would appreciate. Though I don't know how much the Canucks are wanting to bring on a 5'9" centerman, which is always going to be labeled against him, though I still see him being a quality top six centerman that Vancouver could really use. The problem is that I feel like for Minnesota, their defense is kind of all over the place, and there's only really a couple of guys that I think Vancouver would want. Brock Faber, of course, is the big one, but there's no chance in any situation where the Wild trade Faber for anybody right now. I feel like he is as untouchable for Minnesota as you can get. So maybe a Jacob Middleton could work, but again, I don't know if he's quite the puck mover that Vancouver wants. Middleton maybe makes the most sense, but it would have to be Middleton, Rossi, and a couple other big assets to make it happen. And I feel like at that point, they'd rather just go again to a team like Buffalo that has the actual assets that they want. But I think it all depends on if the Canucks want Marco Rossi. If they do, I think that makes a trade a lot more likely, but it really all hinges on their interest in a 5'9" center, which again, for some GMs out there, isn't what they want to go after. But that is going to be it for the Elias Pettersson sweepstakes talk, at least for now. We'll see what ends up happening in the next little bit as we get lead up to the Four Nations. Potentially, we'll see some trades leading up to then, and Pettersson could be a part of that. We'll have to wait and end up seeing what happens there. But I want to know your thoughts down below on all the teams we talked about here. Who do you think is the most likely to trade for Pettersson? Who do you want to see trade for Pettersson? And do you want to see your favorite team trade for Pettersson? Let me know your thoughts and your mock trades down below. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the notification bell. And share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all my trade number content run playlist. And sign up to BetUS today using code YouTube150. Have a great hockey day. Drink some water, y'all. And goodbye.